Welcome back. In this edition of the Auto-Contouring Review, we'll be looking at a paper by Nalee Kim titled Atlas-Based Auto-Segmentation for Postoperative Radiotherapy Planning in Endometrial and Cervical Cancers. In this study, the authors wish to establish what the impact of increasing the database size for Atlas-based contouring had in clinical practice. To do this, they collected a database of 75 contoured cases to use as atlases and test cases. From the 75, they extracted 15 cases to use as their test set. The remaining 60 were partitioned into groups of 20, and these groups of 20 were used to build 3 atlas databases, one of 20 atlases, one of 40 atlases, and one of 60 atlases, where the larger databases included all the atlases included in the smaller databases. These databases were then used to perform atlas-based contouring on the test set, resulting in 3 sets of contours for each of the cases in the test set. Following atlas contouring, a radiation oncologist edited the atlas contours to make them clinically acceptable, and in doing so recorded the time taken to edit them. This left 6 sets of contours on the test set, against which they could evaluate quantitative measures such as dice and Hausdorff distance. So what did they find? In the figures from the paper, the solid line represent the original result from atlas contouring when compared to the original manual contours. The dashed lines represent the results of the edited atlas contours when compared to the original manual contours. The left-hand plot shows the dice score, while the central plot shows the Hausdorff distance. And the right-hand plot shows the processing time, whether that's the time taken for atlas contouring or the time taken for editing. In these results for the CTV, we see that as the database size increases, the quantitative performance marginally increases also. I find it very interesting to see that even the edited contours improve in performance as the database size increases. We'll explore this when we discuss the paper with Nalee. It's also interesting to see that despite this marginal increase in quantitative performance, the editing time, particularly for the database of 60 atlases, is larger than for the smaller databases. For the bladder, the authors found quite poor performance, which wasn't really affected by increasing the size of the database. And again, the time taken for editing the contours seemed to increase as the database size increased. So let's discuss this paper with Nalee now.
Hello Nalee, thank you for joining me for this discussion on your paper today.
Okay, thank you.
So to start off with, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your current role, where you're working and what you're working on.
I'm a radiation oncologist and I'm a now clinical fellow in Samsung Medical Center. Now I'm in a PhD program for auto-contouring in radiation therapy planning process.
Okay, and this paper's sort of, as part of your PhD, was one of your first papers, is that right?
Yes, first paper, yes.
Great. So just to go into the paper now, before the study, what did you expect to see as you increased the size of the atlas database?
At the beginning, for this project, we made a hypothesis that the bigger the atlas library size, then the better results we'll get. So we just started the atlas size with 20 patients, and then 40 patients and 60 patients. So we just, as a result, when you see the paper, we can see the nominal increase in accuracy as a performance in clinical target volume in atlas segmentation. But we also observed a very prolonged processing time with the increasing of atlas size. And
were you surprised by the results?
but it's like quite same as our hypothesis in clinical target volume, because it performs better with the bigger size of atlas.
Yeah.
But when we move on to femur, both femurs or bladder volume, we observed very the atlas size is not that quite at it's not quite some. Yes.
It didn't have that much of an effect, yeah. But then I found one of the interesting things in table 1, where you're looking at the CTV, the DICE scores. You also look at the DICE score of the edited contour compared to the original manual contour, and that seems to increase with atlas database. Whereas I guess my expectation would be that should almost be independent because you're editing it. So, got any thoughts on that?
We edited the atlas-based segmentation in blind with another physician. So he didn't know which segment is from from small atlas size to bigger atlas size. So we also think this result was very interesting because we expected that the similar results will be observed according to the library size, but so we think it's my personal opinion, but I think that each physician usually neglects some points when they are in clinical practice, such as covering internal iliac artery in clinical target volume. But when we look at the results from bigger size of atlas, the results from auto-segmentation showed covering the areas where physicians easily to neglect. So maybe this is the result why better performance was observed even when physicians are editing them. So I think it gives us very good lesson that better auto-contouring performance could help more physicians.
Yes. So yeah, there's. If you start with a good contour, you're more likely to end up with a good contour.
Yes, yes.
I thought another aspect which I found quite interesting. Let me see if I can find it in some of the figures. You found, despite improving sort of the quantitative metrics such as DICE or Hausdorff distance, the actual time spent editing went up, and they seem to spend longer editing the better contours.
Actually, the time we provided in the research, in that research in the paper, is the entire processing time. So which includes auto-contouring time and plus editing time. So when we look at that separately, the editing time is not that different, but processing time requires more time when the atlas size is bigger. So I think we have to modulate the balance between the time and the performance. So I think.
Okay, so even where the contouring results are better, it still takes a similar amount of editing time, but that processing time on the atlas adds to it.
Yes, but it is not like a quite linear results. So maybe it could be maybe it has a bias for that.
Yes, and it's quite a small sample size, so it's hard to read too much into it. I think another aspect is that the bladder performance was quite poor for atlas-based contouring. In the discussion, you refer to the method of atlas selection using templates, and also the sort of low contrast around the bladder. Do you think the choice of template is going to significantly impact the performance, or do you think it's just that it's hard to register bladders?
Actually, I think it is not the template problem. Maybe it's I think there are two reasons for why bladder shows inferior outcomes. The first one is that, as I discussed in the manuscript, that the contrast of bladder is quite similar compared to surrounding tissues, so like fat or some bowels. So and second reason, I think, like clinical target volumes are quite similar among the patients. Like it has some boundaries for vessels and bony structures. So it is quite similar when we look at when you look at it. But when it comes to bladder, there is a high variability among patients. So maybe template cannot pick the right patients to some test set. So I think
it's hard to do that
too.
Atlas selection.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any way in which you would have wanted to extend this study?
Now we are doing some project on comparing the results from, as you reported, in head and neck region. So atlas-based segmentation versus manual contouring, and also AI-based segmentation. So we are trying to compare which one is better, so which one performs better. So.
Okay, so you're starting to look more at the AI side for auto-contouring.
Yes, but
do you think going forward, in the article you refer to the AI work and how it seems to show better results, do you think there's going to be a place for atlas contouring, or do you think AI is just going to fully replace it?
Some say that AI-based segmentation can replace atlas segmentation, but I think it has some strengths and weakness itself. So, for example, even AI-based segmentation is highly dependent on training sets. So each physicians need their own training set to develop the AI-based segmentation. And so, as I discussed in the paper, that some physicians in the limited resources, they find it very difficult to develop their own AI algorithm for auto contouring. So, however, atlas-based segmentation, it could generate very quite similar results of very small, like relatively small number of training set, and it is easily to make some atlas library. So I think, and for example, like femur, like bony structures like femur or mandible, I think it is quite satisfying even with atlas-based segmentation. So, and some points like bladder or bowel or liver, like soft tissue contrast, maybe AI-based segmentation performs better than atlas-based segmentation. So I think it needs to be a hybrid, like yes, for some organs I need, yes.
Take the strengths of each and get the best result we can. Great. Well, thank you for discussing the paper with me. It's been really interesting. And good luck with your PhD.
Okay, thank you very much.
So does increasing the database size for atlas-based auto-contouring help in clinical practice? Well, for the commercial system evaluated by the authors in this study, it appears that there's a marginal improvement with larger databases when you look at quantitative measures such as Hausdorff or DICE. However, these larger databases don't seem to result in any improvement in clinical efficiency. If anything, the study showed worse performance with larger databases based on the increased time taken for processing. As we discussed with Nalee, this doesn't mean that atlas-based contouring is worthless. It certainly serves a purpose where there are bony structures such as the femoral heads and the performance is good. And as we get larger databases, maybe AI is an area where we can find improvement for those structures where atlas-based contouring doesn't perform so well. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me again soon.